Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to the next installment of Interview with an Exorcist. I'm John Barnwell here, north of Detroit, with Dr. Douglas Gabriel, southwest of Detroit. And we're going to continue on this journey, but we're going to bring in some contemporary themes. And it's quite in the buzz this day and age of everybody talking about what we normally call UFOs. And that's quite a subject. And it's interesting, and some people find it even exciting. And we both have stories of personal encounters of various types of unexplained aerial phenomena, as they like to call them these days. They came a new time. Actually, it is better because UFO is flying object. Well, maybe it's not even an object. Maybe it's just a thing that they're seeing, and there's no objective physical nature. And so that brings into another question.
Well, when I was 16, I'm still going to go back to Reverie. I bought one of the fastest cars in town so I could chase tornadoes. And I got very close many times because we lived in Tornado Alley down in Springfield, Missouri, and tornadoes were common. I was also a spelunker. And I also went down and met the miners. Why? Because these are phenomena that a psychic really wants to experience. Because when I see lightning, I see the cherubim. That's the hierarchy of harmony. Other people are running in the house. No, I'm running towards the lightning. When I was down in Mexico, I went up on the Pyramid of the Sun. And as I was going up, it started to rain and some clouds came in with lightning. And there you go. And then they, all the guys up on the Pyramid of the Sun with their walkie-talkies go, you got to get down. There's lightning. Whenever there's lightning, you get struck by lightning up here really easily. I'm like, good. So I ran up to the top, and they were going, crazy gringo, going towards the top. They were all running down the pyramid. I'm running up the pyramid. There weren't that many people there that day. So I got up on top, and here's lightning striking all around me. And I'm going, come on, please hit me. Please hit me. And then I told you the story about ball lightning, where I was within distance of touching it. Well, I don't know if I ever took you out on top of the house of that mansion I lived in Indian Village to experience a heat lightning event, which happened all the time because we were right on the Detroit River, right? So the clouds would come up, and then they create this turbulence, and then you get this back and forth and this heat exchange, and then pretty soon, what would you see? Not only heat lightning, or they call it sheet lightning. I would see ball lightning probably a couple dozen times in the years that I lived there. So if it looked like that kind of weather, I climbed up on the roof. It was, I think I measured it once, 36 feet up or something. And I would try to literally reach into the clouds and touch the ball lightning because I knew that it was a higher spiritual being. And I was just being, a crazy person who wanted to get away from this den of iniquity, this veil of tears, whatever you want to call this material plane. Because if you can see these beings, then it explains a lot. And so I was used to I was a hired gun psychic used to debunk things. So I debunked psychics. I debunked apparitions. They might have been real, though, you see. They might have been real psychics. But anyway, people would ask me, go look at this. Or they'd hand me something. For instance, what if somebody handed this to you? What would you say? You'd go, oh, nice piece of iron slag. You'd feel it. You'd go, yeah, iron slag. Huh, interesting. No, that came from cosmic space. And if you're a psychic and you have telekinetic sensitivity or clairsentience, it's also called, if I hold something in my hand, or if I touch it, or if I get really near it so that I can directly experience it, I can often tell you what it is. Matter of fact, I dealt in a lot of jewels and stuff, buying jewels and all kinds of things like that. But I can take a jewel and tell you if it's glass or real by touching it to my tooth. Okay, so there's certain, or I can tell by things by the sound of them or whatever. But that's a meteorite. So if you can buy this for $5, like I did, buy these all you can, because this is worth about $750, and it will give you the most psychic experience that you've ever had. Why? Because it came from outer space. It's still vibrating. It ain't even here. It's still moving. It's on fire. It's on cosmic fire. So I have a lot of these, and I have bought meteorites this big, and paid $5 for them, and they're worth 5,000 because people touched them. They didn't know what they were. As a matter of fact, when I met my beloved Tyla, I wanted her to have a direct experience of like an out of body awareness of the solar system. So I handed her my most psychoactive meteorite, and it still has dust on it, rusted, that's some meteorites do that. But this one, most psychoactive, when I had handed it to her, and she felt it, and she just had to sit down.
Oh no, it was so much more than that. Imagine we're starting to date, and I find this man, he's so very interesting. I couldn't get enough of whatever he had to say. And he walks into my home and he talks to me. And as he does, he hands me this rock. And immediately I felt my body just fly up into the cosmos. I haven't had a spiritual experience like this since 1984 when I had the one that I've described. I mean, it was intense, and I was embarrassed. So I sat down so I wouldn't fall over. That's what he does to you on a first date. But you should have seen the second date.
He was just introducing you to the doorman.
Yes, correct. Taking to the threshold. I could tell you wanted a threshold experience.
Do that.
Yeah.
And so people are going to want to know how they can have that experience.
They get meteorites. Steiner said,
but it's got to have some dust on it.
Well, you see, there are many types of meteorites, and most people don't know what they are. Nobody knew what they were in the past. And so now they're very expensive, terribly expensive, because unfortunately I convinced many of these people at the rock shows who did have meteorites to start carving them into beads, or carving them into what's called a kris, a knife, or into objects. And then they sold like crazy. And now that guy sells backings for Rolex watches this big, $10,000 for one that's got Murchison sketch etching on it. Actually, one of the first dates we had, second date, I think, I had figured out that Tyla needed a big crystal. I wanted to give her a gift, but I knew that she had wanted a really big crystal, super clear, wonderful, big single terminated crystal. And I'm going, oh, okay. So I set that out on the counter, and then I said, wait, what she really wants is the experience of the cosmos. So I'm going to give her this ball of a meteorite this big, and put it on a little stand and set it there. And amongst some other things, well, she had just come back from a place where she'd had somebody trying to get her one of these. She'd asked for one of these crystals, and she didn't like the one that the person got or whatever. So she walks in and she picks this up, and it's like, well, this is the crystal I knew I was going to get, or whatever, she was having an intuition about. And here's this ball. I kept feeling a ball in my hand that was so heavy that it was inexplicable. That's what a meteorite is. And so she held it in her hand, and she goes, oh, yeah. So I was tuning into her and making sure that she would have, what every queen should have. You should have diamonds and jewels, and you should have meteorites. You should have all kinds of artifacts and all kinds of things that have been handed down. So my house, even before I met Tyla, and now for sure, is filled with all these kind of things. So why am I saying this? Because a UFO. Okay, I have yet to meet an alien from another world that had a physical body. How many aliens have I met that didn't have physical bodies? Aliens from the moon, from Venus, from Mercury, from the invisible planet Vulcan, from the sun, from Mars, from Jupiter and Saturn. I've met all of them. Okay, you can meet their shadow, like you can meet the shadow of the cherubim in the outer planets, but you can also meet them in lightning. You can meet the thrones in the outer planets, but you can also meet them in looking at the shadow of their being called thunder. So thunder and lightning, if it's thundering and lightning, I go out in it. If I could, I'd climb right up into the clouds so that I could be with those beings. Even though I know that's not their active being, it's something that's being shed, something that's being donated, something that's being sacrificed. Now, They're not the only ones. There's 9 hierarchy. There's 3 elemental kingdoms. There are elemental beings of all different sorts. There's ethers, there's plasmas, there's cold plasmas, hot plasmas. So when you're talking about something that's glowing in the sky, so many people over the years have brought me what they considered proof of UFOs, that, aliens are visiting us, or that the government has these ships. And, I look at these things. Most of them I could tell what they were up until recently. Now, the internet's flooded with it. Literally, it is unbelievably flooded with it. I just went and looked at over 5,000 entries on the US, just the US UFO reporting site. And it only goes back a few years. Here in Michigan, we have had over 300 verified sightings. Most of these come with pictures. And over time, Michigan has had, actually, people think Area 51 is the place. That's where, of course, the SR-71, the SR-72 flies out of. Those are our spy ships. The U-2 flew out of there. And they have the Triangle spy ship now, which people have seen it so many times. To call that an alien from another world is silly. And as I've reported, in 1973, I was taking pictures because in every top secret secure place I've ever been, UFOs appear. Also, strangely enough, in every place I've ever lived, strange phenomena appear. A lot of UFOs. I'll tell you about that in a few minutes. But the point is, some of these are spiritual beings, because the veils between the kingdoms and the veil of the threshold between the physical and the spiritual is so diaphanous at this point that anyone with any half-baked clairvoyant could look and see these beings manifesting all the time. So I've met Nixies and Pixies and Undines and Sylphs and Gnomes. I used to go down to talk to the Gnomes down in Arkansas with the miners down there as they were digging for crystals. So all of this is part of the whole phenomena of possession. Okay, are you being possessed by your own will? Are you being possessed by an elemental being? Are you being possessed by compulsion? Are you being possessed by a higher being who's fallen? Are you being possessed by a really high being who's fallen and you're just being tricked into going towards like Mammon? Mammon is a very high being, but he tricks you. I was just talking with Michael McKibben. What is the worship of Mammon? It's a bank. And what is the dogma of the worship of Mammon? That would be usury, paying you interest on money, lying to you and saying that they're holding their money for you. No, they're not. They spend it immediately. Fractional banking. These are all the theological tenets of the dogma, the doctrine of worshiping these demons. So at this point, anytime somebody shows me a UFO, or if I look at it, the most important thing is, how does it make you feel? If it scares you, it's probably man-made. If it's natural, you'll probably laugh as soon as you see it. But if it's an evil one, then you don't laugh. And I'm telling you, I've had so many encounters. I was thinking, trying to count how many. I can't count them, because for some reason I was always living right next to the place where the UFOs were active. For instance, I lived in Milan, Michigan, and during that time in Washtenaw County, the most reported UFO sightings, hundreds of people saw it. There were manifestations. My father was actually involved in one of the investigations in Ypsilanti. I went with him. I saw these things. How does that happen? That one person, I can tell you that I have seen manifestations which should be part of the reports going on in Congress, because I witnessed it with my own eyes, and there were other people standing there witnessing it. And what we saw can't happen. It's supernatural. No, there's some kind of weird force that must have been active in the area. So it's just like ball lightning. Look it up. There are pictures of it, and scientists will tell you it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
There's movies of it. Okay, St. Jerome had to come in and sit next to him and teach him. St. Thomas Aquinas had ball lightning come in the room, and what would you say? It got his sister or something? I think.
Lightning came in the window and killed his sister. Okay, that's quite a story. Something similar happened to me, But I was so young, I was in the crib. But my mother used to love telling the story. And my mother wasn't one to make up stories, just so you know. But the earliest story relating to my own biography is that I was in one of the upstairs rooms that we weren't using as a bedroom. My mother would use it for ironing clothes and doing all that kind of household stuff back when Dad went to work and Mom stayed home. And so I'm laying there in the crib, and it's a nice day. The window's open. She looks out the window, and you could see the water tower from Detroit City Airport right out that window. And then she looks up by the water tower, and there's one of those classic silver disc things, craft, UFO, sitting there right next to the water tower. And she looks at it, and then she looks over at me, and then this like bolt of lightning or plasma something. She was working on potting a plant, and it knocked it right off the ironing board. And she looked at me, and I laughed. I told that story before, but it's so funny. So my earliest story is laughing about a UFO event, and lightning coming in the room. Yeah, I've seen ball lightning. I was working on a Harley Davidson, this old Harley 45, and me and Billy Carps, and we go walking out, and there's these two ball lightning going right down the sidewalk. Like one's a little bit higher up in the air than the other. It looked like a couple, a man and a woman, because it was just the right height going down the sidewalk slowly. And Billy goes to run, and I grab his arm and say, no. You don't want to, they may ground out on you. That could be, we don't know, And so they just kept going right down the sidewalk. And we watched it until they, went off. It's like, so yeah, there are natural phenomena. Or I saw a green orb with my brother and his wife out in Rochester. It was just floating up, but that's like a plasma ball. You see those, and because of the angle of the sun, it refracts and it makes the thing appear green.
Yeah.
Right. And then there's other similar events, like when I was up in Leadville in Colorado, the highest altitude city in the U.S., with Steve Farmer from the Amboy Dukes. He sang and wrote Journey to the Center of the Mind and all that. We were up there with a couple other guys, and we look, and there's all this, every color of the rainbow across the mountain range in a field of clouds with lightning going off and all that. It's just incredible plasma dynamic. We're pointing at it. Look at that. They go, oh, that happens all the time. It's like no big deal.
It's called raining fire in the sky in Colorado. I've seen it myself. It's like when you witness it, you think you're having a spiritual experience.
Well, yeah, but see, when you consider the mineral deposits that are in the mountains can have an effect on what frequency of activity is going on in that particular area, so it's incredible. Yeah, just incredible. But so tell us more about your experience of UFOs while you were out in the islands off of Alaska.
Oh, well, yes, I think I mentioned that in an earlier show, but I was up on a top secret island. I can name it now because it's they no longer use it. It's called Shemya, Alaska. It's about the second or third last island in the Aleutian chain going towards Russia. So it's as close as you can get to have an ear on Russia. And we were in electronic warfare, and we were spying on Russia. And I was doing telemetry and telecommunications and sending planes in to take pictures of their missiles when they were launching, and then having to decode what was on the missile, whether it was a monkey, a cosmonaut, or it was just, just a standard spy capsule. And so we were out on this island. The island is completely flat. It used to be a place where the B-52s were launched to go bomb. And so everything was underground, very strange place, except for in modern times, it was above ground. Terrible place. The wind would blow so hard that we'd have to hang onto ropes, and sometimes it'd blow you right off the island. So we'd go out there, and nobody would go out there. And we'd go out there with our cameras and we would take pictures of these UFOs that were coming from the island beyond us. We took tons and tons and tons, and we were developing them. And then the commander heard about this, brought him in, looked at it, confiscated all of our cameras and said, you're not allowed to do this anymore, blah, blah, blah. But any other top secret places, which I can't mention, that I was at, there's always UFOs there. There's always special forces there. Special forces are to kill you, and the UFOs are to defend the place. Or the UFOs, every time there's an accident in space or there's any kind of emergency in space with NASA, what happens? UFOs show up and start circling it until the emergency is over. This is well documented. So we see these things all the time. The question is how do you interpret them? So we do know that they have a spy plane right now that's in the shape of a triangle. It's taken the place. It's like the one Tom Cruise is called, what he called the Dark Star on his new movie. No, it's called the Triangle. It's been flying out of Area 51 for years, and it's the new spy plane. And sometimes you can see it. We saw it once flying into Selfridge Air Force Base. Myself, my whole van full of children. We rolled down the window, and what was so strange, it's flying along very slowly right with us, and it's a triangle. You can see it, and it's got even lights on it. Hello, lights. You think a UFO sneaking here would have lights on it? Colored lights? No, I don't think so. So anyway, it's flying along, and we're at a stoplight, and we're going along on Ford Road, and we're all going nuts. Here's a UFO, right? Oh my God. So we're screaming at everyone on the road. Couldn't get a single person to look. They were terrified. They wouldn't look. It was like their life depended on them not looking at what we were screaming and yelling, UFO, a UFO. It was like they thought we were trying to prank them. No. When you see these things, because they're an aberration of sense perception, you then start to believe you're seeing things that you're not seeing. And for instance, my children and I are up in the number one city. What is the number one place for UFOs in all of America? Caseville, Michigan. Thousands of sightings. So many pictures of these red balls, okay? And they come right up out of a city just, I think, west of Caseville. And they come along the shore of Lake Huron. And oh, by the way, here's Michigan. How would I do this? There's Michigan, right? Caseville is right at the tip of the thumb. So it sticks out into Lake Huron. And by the way, there's mining going on in Caseville. I'll get back to that in a second. So I'm with my children, we're on vacation, and we're out at the beach, and all of a sudden we see this thing rise up and another one rise up, and they start to dance together and do things, this red ball, and we're like, nothing could do that. And then it'll go real quick, and then it'll slow down and stop, and then it'll go real fast, and then they'll chase each other, and then they started coming along the edge, and they're coming at us. So we're standing there, and a bunch of other people had come out by then taking pictures, and we're standing there, and as these come right above our head, afterwards, every person had a different story of what they witnessed. Some believed they were taken up into the red ball and medical experiments were done on them. Oh, I'm standing right there with them. How did you get taken up? And I didn't, though I did feel something probing me, and all this weird stuff going on. You couldn't get a clear shot. It's all fuzzy and twinkling, right? There's no sound. It's a color you can't even quite describe. It's moving, and it looks as if it even could be growing bigger and smaller and changing in its intensity and luminosity. But when it got right over us, we all agreed it stopped and stayed there for a while. And then every one of us had a different story of what we thought happened in that time, right? Taken up, that you saw your dead people that you knew, everything. What was that? And my children were there, so I could get them on the phone and they could witness. And then, it happened the next night. And, by the way, once it got beyond us and we're trying to focus and you can't focus for some reason, it's like when you're looking at the Aurora Borealis, you can't quite focus because the way that it's doing its thing with its ionization, blah, blah, it's really weird. So you're looking at this ball and it's going down and then it goes way up and then it comes way down and then it goes way over here and then it starts moving quickly. And so it's not something being blown by the wind because it's something controlling the action because the actions are erratic. They're random. And then all of a sudden, one zoomed off like in lightning speed and then was gone. And then the other one hung out, came back a little, did a few more dances, and then all of a sudden took off like lightning, just like the ones that I saw in Alaska. So you can have all kinds of these experiences, but the question is, how do you interpret them? And as I'm going to say again, were you happy? Were you sad? Were you scared? What was your experience? What did your senses tell you? What did your intuition tell you? Because I'm telling you, some of these things are 100% inexplicable. I don't know what they are, and there's nothing I can tell you to help you understand what they are, because now there are drones. But here's the deal: you can get to some of these by asking the question, how are they appearing now? Well, how do they appear now? They'll appear over a major city, decloak. They'll decloak. People will see them. They'll be sitting right there until there's a whole bunch of people come out, and they're all taking pictures. And that's why you see so many pictures on the internet. It's like they're there for a photo opportunity. And then what do? Zoom off at speeds, and no sound, no nothing, just zooming off. Sometimes right at them, zoom, goes right over their head. And you go, would an alien? What would the alien be trying to tell us if that was their actions? What is that telling you? It's telling you, get ready. This is the revelation of method. In other words, we will soon have an alien visitation. The problem will be the alien's only going to talk to the Pope or Joe Biden and Hunter Biden, or there'll be aliens. Don't you worry, because we already have the technology to manifest that. But that's not the reality that I can help you with. The reality I can help you with is, I know a guy named Trevor Constable. He wrote about 10 books. One of them is called The Cosmic, I think I even wrote it down because I always forget this, Cosmic Pulse of Life. He also wrote a bunch of other ones called They're Alive, Living UFOs. They Live in the Sky. So I went out to meet him. I went out to meet Rick Mansell, a guy who did a lot of translation of Steiner stuff, and to meet Galen Hieronymus. And Galen Hieronymus, very famous radionics guy. And so I sat I was out there for weeks, and he knew Trevor Constable. So he introduced me to Trevor Constable, and Trevor says, well, you're so lucky. I'm going out into the high plateaus, tomorrow, whatever. And he took infrared cameras because he had been a cameraman, but he was also a pilot in the Air Force previously. He'd go out east of LA out into the desert, and there were the high power lines. And he filmed UFOs with infrared photography. And it would look exactly like a cell dividing. What's that called? Mitosis. There'd be one, and it'd go all around. And what was its shape? It looked just like a UFO. When you took a picture of it, a real picture, not infrared, it would do what all UFOs do, which is creates overexposure in the emulsion on the picture when you're taking a picture of a UFO. The bottom of, if you really want to know, and if it's taken with a camera that then was, you put the film paper into emulsion, there was a chemical exposure that then is detected as jet black. Same thing happens with an orgone box, right? You take a picture of an orgone box when water's running through it, and the bottom is jet black, and there's little blue lightning sparks coming off the top. Same exact thing happens with these infrared pictures that Trevor Constable was taking in the high plateaus of the desert outside of LA. And so he showed me how he did this. He had tons and tons and tons of film. I went to his house. He showed me all this stuff. And I guess, all these guys, they usually work alone, and they're hoping that you're going to be the guy to come along to carry on their legacy, right? So they're happy to show you all their stuff, right? So he's showing me all this stuff. I said, well, what do you do with this, though? What do you conclude? Yes, you can go out there and you know exactly when, the exact weather pattern. And he was able, especially, to get pictures of these worm critters being created by high power lines, electrical high power lines. And what happens right before most high power lines go down? UFOs, right along the power lines, balls of light running up and down, right? I'm not going to go into what that is. That's a very bizarre thing, what that is. I've been dealing with that. praying for that and doing all kinds of mitigation for that for many years. But the point is, when you have a lot of electromagnetism, you're pulling angels down into this sphere. So yes, sometimes some of them escape, and those are angels escaping. But what happens? They disappear. It's just like all these new pictures you see that people are getting down close to the ground and they're taking infrared pictures at night. And what do they see? What looks like meteorites. Shoom, 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 shoom. Steiner described that clearly as elemental beings. And what are they? They're elemental beings, and they're luminous. And so if you happen to be sensitive to infrared, you would see them. I am. I could see them. So what are those? Those would be elementals of one kingdom passing into another. In other words, what we would call beings of water, undines, as they're evaporating, turning into sylph, beings of the air. And you're actually seeing a transformation. You're seeing them cross over or try to cross over this veil that usually exists between these realms. Those veils are so thin now, you can see practically anything you want to see.
Yeah, Rudolf Steiner makes specific reference to that when he's talking about, he's over at the old Arthurian center over in the West Wales, Cornwall, that whole area, Tintagel. And he talked about the Arthurian Knights looking at the waves crashing on the shore and seeing the interaction between the sylphs and the undine in that, so that you can perceive, just as miners do when they're working down in the mines, that they'll see gnomes relative, the elemental beings of the minerals. And it's not an accident that if you go down the list of European clairvoyants, how many of them were mining engineers? Emanuel Swedenborg, Johann Wolfgang von Goethe ties to the mines, Novalis, the poet, Friedrich von Hardenberg, he was involved with mines for a time. And so there is this whole idea of that there's things that happen in between the various aspects of the kingdom of nature. And so that's something you can pay attention to. But when you start looking at these things and you see like manifestations like, well, in the ancient world, for example, the meteors that Douglas was referring to earlier, the earliest form of iron that was used by mankind is meteoric iron. In fact, they were used in what's called an adze. A-D-Z-E is the way they spell it in Egyptology. But it's fashioned from meteoric iron and were used in a ritual called the opening of the mouth ceremony. And that was where they could empower the sahu, the mummy. They could empower it with certain words of power. And so there's been this magical relationship to meteorites spanning the century. There's the significant meteorite in Tyre, for example. Or at the Kaaba, that's a meteorite, supposedly, although they won't let anybody examine it, And so when you get into unexplained aerial phenomena, some of them can be explained like Dr. Gabriel is saying here, but when you get to some of these things that are so craft oriented, like that when we were at Aquarian Revelation Center was a group that we used to do lectures with, and there would be all these astrologers from all over the world, all the top people. Ray Merriman was head of it. We talked about him before. We were at this barbecue at Terry Luke's house. He was a noted photographer in the Detroit area. And these two craft come straight over the barbecue, and they had a couple of lights on each end and then a light in the center, kind of like pointing down. Everybody's looking at him. And Terry runs into the house to get his camera. And by the time he came out, they left. But the way they left was what was truly remarkable, because one of them went to maximum altitude in a blink, and the other one went from straight above us all the way to the horizon, okay, in a blink. And I did the math on that. And that would have to be 10 to 14,000 miles an hour to be able to do that. So that's advanced technology. But that doesn't mean it's not USAP, undisclosed secret access project, as it's called in the military intelligence and all that. So that there's being able to discern between current technology of the secret projects groups within the corporations and within the US government. That's a whole other matter. But to bring this into an anthroposophical sphere, it's very easy, because if you look at the universe anthroposophically, all those points of light you see are stars. And those are communities of beings. And many of them have different planetoids or planets circling around them. There's all these things going on. But they're still looking for an inhabited planet when there aren't any. If there's a planet there, that means that there's some kind of beings there. That doesn't mean you can see them. Okay. And if you look in the annals of ufology, you'll find that there's descriptions of people that have gone inside some of these craft, and they look, and everything's smooth. There's no fittings for anything. It's like you're in a Jetsons cartoon. I mean, it's really, there's no screws, no bolts, nothing's attached by anything. It's just kind of there. And you look and you say, well, what could that be? Could it be that this has been manifested into the physical world for the sake of being able to perform activities within this world of ours? Say that's a way one can look at it, and that there are advanced beings with craft. You know, we know from Rudolf Steiner, he talks about the Vimana, the flying craft of Atlantis. You know, and that became quite a thing. There's the Vaimanika Shastra, which is referent to a book that in 1952 was written by G.R. Josher. But in there, he talks about study of aeronautical and mechanical engineering ideas about ancient craft that are referred to in the Vedic tradition in ancient India. So there's definitely things there, but I don't like to paint myself into a corner when I try to describe a particular phenomenon.
I used to go down to the miners, Jimmy Coleman, the whole Coleman family, Oka Stanley, the Wright brothers. And because I was a psychic, I could help them find a good place to dig to find the best crystals. You know, to me, the best are double terminated. So I could easily determine underground where they were. And so I would be there with them, and I'd ask, "Oh no, listen, I'll do this for free for you, but you have to let me come if you come upon one of these pockets that's a giant geode. I want to be there when you open it." And they hand dig this thing. And Jimmy Coleman's the best crystal. He sets the price for crystals worldwide by selling his collection every couple of years. That's how powerful he is in that world, and he's the best crystal digger in the world, even in Brazil. So he would bring me down there, and when he'd open one of these things, I'd say, "Now do it very carefully. I want to be the first one to look inside this thing." Okay, well, what's inside it? It's dark, right? Because it's a hollow. But when you look inside of it, what do you see? No, you don't see gnomes with little red hats and beards and smoking a pipe. You see blue lightning, and it's shooting all around, and it smells like ozone. And you literally, when they come rushing out, they hit you right in the face. These gnomes hit you right in the face, and you just go, "Well, I'll never forget how that feels," or whatever. So anytime that you want to connect to a gnome, I was able to connect to gnomes in that way. And I'd go to places wherever there was weirdnesses. For instance, there's this pond right around here that I used to swim in. I've swum in it many times. And there's a Nixie there. Why is the Nixie there? Because she's drowned numerous people there. No boats go on this thing. It's just, we go out swimming. Now, you know the place. I'd mention it because, but it's a very secret, sacred lake. And I want to say the name of it, but Thibodeau and I and the whole gang used to go with the family. We'd go out there swimming all the time. But at this one spot, there's a Nixie. There's a water spirit there. Nixies aren't nice. Don't marry a Nixie. Don't marry an undine. Don't marry an elemental being. Holy moly, that you give your soul away, and that's it. It's like signing your soul to the devil. So these elemental beings can be used for good, but they can be used for bad also. And the military, of course, the second they discover anything, what do? They turn it into a weapon. So why did we see so many UFOs here in Michigan? Because of two Air Force bases. Sawyer Air Force Base in Sawyer in Marquette has had to be closed down repeatedly because of the hundreds of complaints of UFOs. Okay. And then the one that is the classic, better, way better than Area 51. Area 51 are real planes. Those are, real things. That's not the secret, top secret stuff. Okay. Secret. It's actually top secret, but it's not the really good stuff. The good stuff was at Kinchilo Air Base, which started back in World War II. And it has missiles, defense missiles there. It's got all kinds of strange planes there. It's got 3 air strips that are a triangle. The strangest airport you've ever seen. And so the military has closed it down repeatedly because of so many complaints. Why? They go out, they experiment over the Great Lakes. So they won't be seen. Hello? In 66, I think it was, repeatedly, Chicago has seen so many UFOs over Lake Michigan. It's disturbing. Sometimes 10,000 people see it all at once, and very real, very vivid, certainly something very real. So does the military have that? Yes. Go look up John Searl, Searl, and you will see where they got the technology. And John Searl was basing it upon the work done in Vienna in 1875, when electrogravitational forces were basically discovered, what you'd call levity. But it's so simple to do. It's ridiculous. So Searl actually made devices big enough for humans to get in, and he'd get them rotating so fast they would take off and go out into space. And he had ticked off the Air Force so much that they came and they tried to limit his research. Now he just turned it into a generator that's about as big as a phonograph record player. And it's nothing more than the machine that he made on a large scale. Put in a small scale, you can power your whole house from it. But go and look it up. Oh, same Wikipedia that tells you ball lightning doesn't exist is going to tell you that Searl is a fake. He's a charlatan, but you can go to his site and order one of these things and get your house running on it if you'd like. So, and then also he is very aware now. I didn't know this, but his family has now gone into MHDs, magnetic hydrodynamic generators. It's a generator using magnets that creates a gap across a strong magnetic charge, runs a fluid, either a gas or an air that's been impregnated with, argon 25 and, heavy metals. So you run a heavy metal through an open magnetic field, you get infinite direct current. Self-sustaining. It starts itself. It never runs out. It's not a perpetual motion machine. It's a perpetual energy device for direct current. Top secret. I know this because my military connections and people I know. Matter of fact, one particular engineer who is a top secret security for nuclear also confirmed this as well. Oh, many people in the military confirmed this for me. Every nuclear plant in America has a little tiny room where there's an MHD in it. The MHD is what starts the plant, because a nuclear power plant can't start until it's like 50% of what it's supposed to produce because of its nature. So they have MHDs on, I know this for a fact, on aircraft carriers and submarines. They could even make them small enough to go into flying devices. That's what's on the Searl device that we're seeing everywhere now. And so ask the question, why would the government, the military, want us to see these things now? They don't have to see them because they can cloak them. And I'll tell you that story in a second.
Yeah, well, for readers of magazines that used to be in the bookstore, like Energy Unlimited, they have all these articles by these borderline science people. It's Borderline Science. That's another magazine. Yeah, you have the stories of Wilhelm Reich and working with Cloudbuster and being attacked by what he called melanor, which was like this atmospheric phenomena that was raining down on him because of creating an orgone imbalance. and that it was kind of a dynamic retaliation from that realm. So, beware of tinkering with Mother Nature. I used to live on Pine Lake, and I had a balcony overlooking the lake, and I lived there for several years. And I like to go out into the water, and I would do like this ritual with my arms, but I'd be in the water up to my neck, so nobody could see what I was doing. And I would do this ritual invocation of my guardian angel, right? And then these fish would come and swim around me in a circle real fast, right? And that happened for a while. And then eventually I had this dream. And in this dream, this Undine goddess came to me. And as she would go back and forth, she would get closer and closer. And she was the most beautiful female figure I'd ever seen, until she got right before me. And I realized that all the beauty that she was able to display was totally paralyzed in her eyes, that there was this totally intimidating darkness happening there. And I woke up, and I was like, really kind of shocked, and reached over and grabbed a book by Lord Dunsany, the fantasy writer, really the father of fantasy literature, and kind of a distant relation to my family. But anyways, I opened it up to this page, and on the page, it says someone is burning cedar wood there, and there was a burn mark on the word cedar wood. Like somebody had been smoking a pipe and an ash jumped on it, like 100 years ago or something. So that you're living in a dynamic field of nature that is continually in dialogue with you through the events that you experience. It's just that we have become desensitized to living with this field of consciousness and beings, and it's important to keep that perspective, because that can keep you working in a wholesome way. There's so many other stories, but I don't want to use up all the time.
Well, Joseph Cato wrote a book called The Awesome Life Force. So if you want to see the proof of this, if you want to see the guy in 1875, pictures of him charging a plate, and it has levity, you can get it in this book. There's also, as I mentioned, the Cosmic Pulse of Life, but also go to NASA's research. NASA's research, you will find that levity is commonplace now. They can use so many different things. They can use light to create levity. They can use sound to create levity. And when they use sound to create levity, they do it with liquids. And if they do it with memory metal, then the sound, what do they call this? The sonoriferous ether is called. But anyway, they use sound, and it causes water or liquids to turn into shapes that are the cosmic shapes that happen for certain frequencies. So when John talks about a UFO device that has no seams in it, well, perhaps it's created out of the sound ether, out of memory metal, and that the levity comes also through whatever it is that's creating its shape, can create then the anti-gravitational levity force. But NASA has this. They can create it through laser blast. They can create it through light, intense light. They can create it through sound. And the ones that for sound are amazing, because as soon as they turn up the frequency, the round ball of water turns into shapes that we would recognize as some of the platonic solids, as well as the cosmic shapes that make the universe. So these things are very real. But now the question is, are you contacting the spiritual world, or are you contacting subnature? Are you contacting supernature, or are you contacting subnature? Now, here's the deal. Either way, you're contacting an alien. If you contact through supernature, an angel, they're an alien. They don't belong here. They don't manifest here except to cast off their lower bodies when they're captured by electromagnetism, or through manifestations between between the realms. Or they come to a person. They can take on a diaphanous kind of a ethereal form and manifest to people. Some angels can do that, no problem. Archangels, well, archangels can happen in a variety of ways, most of the time communicating between other people. So when you have communication all over the world, or you get a communication from your friend in New Zealand through your intuition, that's the archangels. But when you really want to get to, whether it's a tin can in space, subnature, or whether it is a time being that is manifesting across the veil of one kingdom to another, that is determined by your own moral perspective. And if you are afraid, you're going to see even an angel as I call him, a tin can, an alien, a space alien in a tin can. I'm making fun of the fact that a space alien coming from far away is not going to need what we would know as normal materials to make a spaceship. And if they did, they would be able to cloak themselves from us. And if they were here and they had good intention, they would appear and we'd see them and we'd get to talk to them. And if they didn't, they have bad intentions, and really we don't want to know what they're doing. Maybe they're already here and they're among us. Who can say? But the point is that I can see the thing in the sky, and I can tell you in most cases if it is supernature or subnature. And subnature makes you fearful. Supernature actually makes you happy. It makes you kind of giddy. You kind of get this feeling like you're all supercharged up. So one night, not long after, we'd read this prophecy of a person that said that there was going to be, I don't know, Tyla would have to tell the story, but anyway, there's a sign and that there was going to be some people arise out of this area. And he was referring to Michigan and Northern Ohio. And he says, and there's going to be a sign in the sky, he basically makes a reference to what you would think would be a meteorite. Well, we're sitting in the place that we sit, that we call our Yggdrasil, looking out of the world through these big windows on a pond and looking at the world. And our joke is, we're like Odin and Frigg, and we're betting on what's going to happen with humanity. That's actually how we started, was making a parody of, most people are so stupid and the world is so stupid that we're like Odin and Frigg with the head of Mimir next to us that gives us any answer. And she has the well of Erd to give any answers about the future. But we bet against each other. Oh, no, Biden's not going to make it, or whatever. So we bet, and so we're sitting there looking out this window after we hear this prophecy, and boom, a meteorite comes over our head and explodes. And where does it land? On Tyla's land in Brighton. It lands on Tyla's land. The whole meteorite, what do they call it? Spread field, is on her property. So we know that there's meteorite that landed there. Then right after that, I'm glad you're here.
I know.
She looks out the window and she goes,
I'm your witness.
Oh my. And I could tell by her voice that something was really out the window. So I jumped out of my chair and I looked and I'm going, she goes, what is that? I went, that's not stars. That's not atmospheric drift.
It's not Starlink. It was
not Starlink.
And it was too much animation. There was an etheric quality to it.
Yeah, and it was twinkling, and they were moving in a way that was inexplicable. Nothing can move like that. And they were out there, and there must have been a dozen of them, and they were twinkling, and we're both just standing there going, "Oh my God!" And we're looking at each other like, but we're happy, right? We're not afraid.
Not me. I decided at that point, I ran into the bathroom, closed the door, and told him to tell me when it was clear to come out. And then I could hear Douglas in the other room hooping and hollering about something else that he saw that was following those lights.
Yes. Out the same window. I'm standing right there. I've been looking at the same spot in the sky, which wasn't a mile away. It couldn't have been maybe a half mile away is what it looked like, but you can't tell because if you tried to focus in on one of these twinkling lights, something happened to your perception. You got all messed up. You were going, okay, where am I? What's going on? I'm like getting confused almost. And so the way they were moving, she goes, what's this? Those are some type of elemental beings, I don't think they're angelic. I think they're elemental. And you can tell by the way they move. They're certainly otherworldly, but I believe that they have come from the ground and that they're twinkling. She then ran to the bathroom. And so then I ran to go look from different directions. And then I came back to the window and I'm standing there and they're still there and they're still like a gnat, like a cloud of gnats. That's what they're acting like a cloud of gnats. Okay, what can fly like a cloud of gnats? Nothing. Appears right before me, scarier than hell. Matter of fact, I thought it was hell. I thought it was a demon. Is a thing that looked like a, they often call it a cigar. It's long, but at the end it looks like it's got a tail fin. But it had a light at the bottom, and the light was not giving off any light, but it was bright. And you're going, that's Lucifer. That's what Lucifer does. And I'm looking at this thing going, oh my God, this is man-made. This is scarier than hell. They're following, they decloaked right in front of my eyes. They decloaked right as I was looking at that exact spot, because they were right behind these twinkling stars or whatever they were, twinkling elementals. And it decloaked and it sat in the sky. And literally I could tell that it was real by certain perspectives you can get looking at it. Anyway, the point is that it sat there and it didn't move, but it made a sound. And the sound was the scary sound of hell. It was that sound they put in the scary movies where, and it's like this rumbling, the whole house is rumbling, and I'm like going, oh my God, I'm being drawn into hell. And I can't take my eyes off of it. I'm absolutely transfixed, and I'm yelling at Tyla.
We've heard enough about that. So what happened next?
What wasn't that the day after you and I were talking, and I started mentioning UFOs, and you said, well, no, we're really not into getting into the UFO thing. And then the next day, I get a call from you, and you tell me this story.
And we wouldn't talk about UFOs because we were on BIN, and I could get 750,000 hits by using buzzwords. But the biggest buzzword is always UFOs, and I didn't use it. And I wanted to prove that I could control the BIN, I don't know, the board that they put, who gets the most hits on, by using other things, spiritual things. So anyway, this thing decloaks, it appears there. And then when the twinkling stars start to move on, some of the twinkling stars just all of a sudden zoom off at infinite speeds. And you go, whoa, well, where did that one go? And then another one zooms off at another one. And then the ship starts to move. The ship behind them starts to move. And because it's moving towards them, the twinkling things start moving forward. And then you can see that this man-made demonic device is chasing these elemental beings to try to probably steal their secrets, or capture them, turn them into a weapon. And then most of them started to take off, and then some of them would actually blink in and out. They would dissolve and be gone for a while, then come back and dissolve, be gone for a while. But that man-made ship was absolutely consistent with the noise it was making and everything. And then when all the twinkling stars went off, it started chasing them, disappeared, started going faster, and disappeared, cloaked right in front of me, and disappeared. This was right in front of my eyes, not less than a mile from our house.
Well, we know, I mean, what President Trump mentioned, cloaking devices and military craft. And really, if you dig into people like Richard Dolan and all that, people that are just tireless researchers in the field, you can get the account of how we conquered anti-gravity back in 1956. I believe it was July or June. I don't recall, but that there are anti-gravitational devices mounted in the wings of B-52s, and have been there for time immemorial because they're such heavy craft. It helps to take the strain off the engine. So there's a lot out there, and really, if you know about it, it's already an outdated technology.
That's right. So one more remark before we close. We need to learn that what we would call alien beings from the spiritual hierarchy, they're not alien at all. They're part of us. Rudolf Steiner actually says that your guardian angel is yourself coming to you from the future. So when we're looking at aliens, all the 9 hierarchy would look like aliens. And if you saw one of the 9 hierarchy and you had an impure heart, an immoral soul, you're going to see demons. Now, here's the other thing. The 3 elementary kingdoms of mineral, plant, and animal. They're beings who have sacrificed and donated themselves. In some cases, they have rebelled and become retarded and gone backwards in evolution. But the point is, all of these elemental beings and these elemental kingdoms, if you saw them, you would think you're looking at an alien. It isn't like the cutesy little pictures that they show of fairies and sprites. No, they're demonic and they're mean and they want to hurt you. Okay, so if you think of it, below us are alien realms in subnature, and above us are alien realms in supernature. The question is, which way are you going to go?
Well, what a fascinating conversation you and John had, but there are a few remarks that I'd like to make without having to cut into you all the time, Douglas.
Please,
now, you see, as
look
you're telling this story, I have a different perspective of what these UFOs and aliens are. I believe that what we're experiencing, except for the military stuff, that's just hoo-ha from the military and whatever their Project Bluebeam is. But people have authentic experiences of something that's not of this material physical world. And what is that? And I think it's that we are interacting with higher spiritual beings. But if you don't have the supersensible organs to perceive what it is, you come away with other kinds of visual or hearing aberrations of what it is. And I think about that story that we've all heard before, that the American Indians couldn't see the ships of the British Pilgrim Society out there in the water because they didn't have a concept of a ship, so they didn't know what that was. So when I hear stories of you talking about your UFO experience, comparing it to others, let's say the people in Congress, are they seeing a spiritual being? Some of them, of course, we know were just wrapped up in the military con. But the ones that claim that they do see it, or the witnesses, are they seeing higher spiritual beings, but they, being spiritual materialists or just flat out materialists, can't conceive of it? Whereas I don't see them materially, but I feel the beings all around me. And then when I look at a crop circle, what I see is, here's the crop, the wheat. I see a spiritual being leaving its imprint on the earth to let us know that they're there. And that's why they're so perfectly geometric. They're just beautiful. The ones that are, we see the ones that are fake, and obviously they're fake, but not these others. Those are spiritual beings speaking to us in the only way that we can hear it. All right, comments.
Oh, without a doubt. They are trying everything they can to talk to us across that threshold, that veil between these kingdoms, and let us know they exist. They shouldn't be interviewing people at Congress about UFOs. They should be interviewing people who've seen angels and archangels in Archai.
But they don't have a concept of that, Douglas. They're never going to do that. That place is filled with demons.
Right. Well, let me read this. Can I read you a meditation? This is how.
If it doesn't bore me, is it exciting and good?
It's
and
terribly exciting.
Okay.
Goethean conversations. That's what we always used to have. That was to bring angels, archangels, and archai into the room to participate, so that what we were saying, and this happens with you and I, it happens in anywhere two or more gathered in His name. You can have a visitation by one of these beings. You don't need to have a UFO visitation. You can have this right now, but you need to have at least two people. And this is the meditation we used for every college meeting for the Waldorf schools, which were ran by the teachers. The teachers got together, they read this, and they prayed that the spiritual being would manifest right there and bring us more than what any individual in the group had. Bring something more. And
okay, well, bring it on. What if we all say, we'll all be there with you in consciousness as you say?
This is it.
Okay.
We wish to form our thoughts in such a way that we may be conscious that behind each of us stands His angel, gently laying his hands on the heads of each. This angel gives you the strength which you need. Above your heads there sweeps the circling archangels. They carry from one to the other what each has to give the other. They unite your souls. Thereby you are given the courage of which you stand in need. Out of this courage, the archangels form a chalice. The light of wisdom is given to us by the exalted beings of the Archai, who are not limited to the circling movements, but who, coming forth from primal beginnings, manifest themselves and disappear into primal distances. They reveal themselves only in the form of a drop of light in this place, in this chalice. Into the chalice of courage, there falls a drop of light, enlightening our times, bestowed by the ruling spirit of our age. the time being the Archangel Michael. I'll add that at the end. So it comes from primal beginnings and then disappears to primal distances. What's that sound like? A UFO. And what's
Okay.
it drop off? A light, a drop
Okay.
of light.
But it kind of takes me off I'm just looking at this in a mundane way, not really a spiritual
Oh.
way. But that you take the telescope Lucifer on Mount Graham. I'm not sure, is that in Utah? I don't know where Mount Graham is, but it's in the United
It's Four
States.
Corners.
John probably knows. And,
It's near Four Corners.
okay. So we've watched this for a decade, where the Pope is supposed to be looking for space balls that are light beings out in space. I'm going to tell you, that's how far removed that Pope is from the spirituality that he's supposed to be preaching, that he needs a telescope to see the spiritual beings.
A telescope named Lucifer.
Yeah.
It's
Get
binary.
on with it.
And they look out and they look at infrared images, and they'll show you, they don't now, they're out, no, you got to go to certain places to find them, but they'll show you infrared pictures of the same thing that Trevor Constable showed me and showed in all of his infrared photography, was beings that would divide right in front of you, beings that would move around. They had life, they had consciousness. There was no doubt whatsoever.
And to get back down to the mundane again, because I want people out there to realize that they can have this perception. So let's just, here's an ordinary one. I see red, but is it the same red you see? I don't know. I'm not inside of you to know what red is. We have an experience called red, and we've all agreed that that's the color. But what if you're colorblind and you may not see the colors that I see? You can only see red and green, but I can see orange and purple. Well, what's that about? And that perception. So when you are looking, when you are using your organs of supersensible development, which we teach you how to develop in our Gospel of Sophia series, when you develop these organs of perception, then you can fully realize and perceive these beings that are higher and lower than your own. But
Absolutely.
if you don't have that, then you're sitting in Congress thinking that these aliens are mechanical, physical things walking on the earth. Oh, and be fearful of it too.
Going back to your other point, Pope Francis is an amateur astronomer. When he came to America, he went there. He
also
wanted
an
to see these
amateur
beings.
pope.
Yeah, he's an amateur pope.
Yeah.
That's very funny. I wish I would have made that up. So he then says,
I keep telling everybody that you get the good stuff from your honey sitting next to you in that chair.
I'm just translating what my wife tells me.
That's right. No, Douglas, you're so brilliant, and I love doing it. But what I've really enjoyed is you sparring with John, because I have heard these stories that you and John talk about for years. And so as you're telling the story, John usually brings in even more depth of what that experience was, and it validates that all the stories you've told us for all of these years are real. You, my dear, are an incredible being.